Stories are the most powerful thing on earth. They are literally life and death. Wars are waged based on the story of who is the hero and who is the villain. You are the result of a story your parents told each other, the one-night stand, the soulmate, and friends who became so much more. Life and death. So wouldn't you like to understand them better, these stories? How Story Works, an elegant guide to the craft of storytelling by Lani Diane Rich, demystifies stories and helps you understand why you love what you love, why you hate what you hate, and why prologues are almost always a bad idea. How Story Works by Lani Diane Rich. Available on Amazon in ebook, audiobook, and paperback form. Get your copy today.
Give me the power. Give me the dark.
Noelle, you all right?
I call on you, the laughing gods.
Oh, okay. I mean, the laughing gods don't sound so bad.
Let your blackness crawl beneath my skin.
Oh, God, that's not going to end well.
Accept thy sacrifice of Xander's stupid fucking bracelet.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that.
Right? Welcome to Still Pretty. I'm film scholar Noelle LaCroix.
And I'm story expert Lani Diane Rich of Chipperish Media.
And we are here today to talk about Witch, the third episode of Season 1, which aired on March 17th, 1997, and was written by Dana Reston and directed by Stephen Craig. This is the only episode of Buffy done by either of them, and the only time in the entire run of Buffy that an episode is done by both a one-time writer and director.
I know, so we've already hit like a big first moment.
There we go.
All right, let's go on patrol.
In Witch, Buffy tries out for the cheerleading squad, much to Giles' disapproval.
You have a sacred birthright, Buffy. You were chosen to destroy vampires, not to wave pom-poms at people.
When a cheerleader's hands catch on fire at tryouts, Buffy saves the day, and the group gets into research mode, despite Buffy's protests.
You guys don't have to get involved.
What do you mean? We're a team. Aren't we a team?
Yeah, you're the Slayer, and we're like the Slayerettes.
After messing up during the tryouts, a girl named Amy freaks out about her inability to do what her mother Catherine did, who was a cheerleading legend back in the day.
She was the best. And I can't get my body to move like hers. I choked in there so bad.
When Amy becomes third alternate, a shadowy figure performs magic to take enough girls off the team that Amy gets on, starting with Cordelia, who goes blind during school the next day.
What's happening? I can't see anything.
One by one, Amy's competition is taken out, including Buffy, who falls under a drunken spell that gets Amy on the team.
Amy, you just made cheerleader. No, you don't want her. She's a woman.
A wise choice indeed.
As Buffy gets loopier, Giles identifies the spell, which will kill Buffy in a few hours. Willow and Xander keep an eye on Amy, while Buffy and Giles go to confront Amy and her mother, only to discover some Freaky Friday shit going on.
She switched. She switched your bodies, didn't she?
While Catherine cheers, Giles and Amy take Buffy to the chemistry lab to reverse the spell. Catherine falters at the top of the pyramid and runs off to stop them. Giles reverses the spell just as Catherine breaks in with an axe. And then things get bad.
I'm going to put you where you can't make trouble again.
Guess what? I feel better.
Catherine casts a spell, sending Buffy to a dark place, but Buffy reflects the spell back onto her, and Catherine ends up where she belongs, inside the trophy she won in high school.
Whoever she is, I don't think we'll have to worry.
All right, so Noelle,
Yes.
What did you think about Witch?
Oh my gosh. There's a lot to unpack in Witch that I didn't see when I watched through it the first time. Mm-hmm. In fact, I had to watch through it. I had to watch through it a couple of times after my first watch this time because I had to go back, mostly because the first time through, I couldn't remember which witch was which in the which switched it. Sorry. I had to do that.
No, I love it. That's adorable.
But the thing I was trying to figure out was, at what point is Amy Amy, and at what point is Amy really Catherine?
Yeah.
And we hear when Amy's story comes out, we hear that it was a few months ago that Amy and her mother, or that Amy, we hear that it was a few months ago that Amy woke up in her mother's room.
Yes.
So Catherine presumably switched their bodies over the summer and then starved her stolen body, because the first thing that we hear about Amy is that Willow is surprised that Amy wants to go out for cheerleading. And then we hear that she lost a lot of weight. And the way that Willow says it suggests to me that it was abrupt and unexpected. So Catherine has been in this body long enough to starve it down to cheerleader thinness. So from the very beginning, that Amy that we see is actually her mother.
Is actually Catherine, except, and this is the thing that I really don't like about Witch, except that everything that we see of Amy up until the moment that she comes home and throws her backpack at Catherine and says, do my homework, right? Everything we see of her up until then is this vulnerable, she's trying so hard, but she just can't do what her mother did. And when you go back, like the thing about a reveal like that, like a turn like that, is that when you go back, you're supposed to be able to see the turn all the way through, and it's supposed to be clear. But rather, I think we are deliberately misled so that they can preserve that, oh my God, it was her mother all along.
Right.
And every time I watch this episode, I always end up going back to that question, when did Catherine, take over Amy? And I mean, and textually, it was months ago. It was well before the beginning of this episode, well before the first time we see Amy. Yet we have all of that, vulnerability, all of that fear, which is not something that is really part of Catherine. Catherine is super, super evil, and there's that moment with Cordelia where Cordelia comes in and threatens Amy in the locker room, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we see Amy looking all tense and looking all scared and intimidated, and no way is Catherine, with the kind of power that she has, going to be intimidated by that.
Absolutely not.
She's going to be like, all right, bitch, I'm taking you out. And that's, of course, the next thing she does when she makes Cordelia blind. So that whole thing, I think, is a misdirect done poorly. A misdirect done poorly will never match up when you go back and watch it. So we are deliberately lied to in those early moments with Amy. And that always bugs me here.
Absolutely. And that scene that you just mentioned with Cordelia in the locker room is another sort of, I feel like we're tricked again just in the film language there, because that we enter the locker room with a handheld camera and we're sort of walking past the showers that are dripping ominously and reminding us of, the horror genre where, poor Janet Leigh is stabbed to death in Psycho, or, whatever, what have you.
Or Carrie is attacked in the high school showers when she has her period in Carrie. Yeah.
Yeah. So, high school showers, we've got, this is creepy. We've got the same green hue that we see in the cauldron in the attic. It's creepy. The camera sort of leers around the edge of the lockers at Amy, and it really feels, for all intents and purposes, like we're setting up the idea that there's something sneaking up on her, whether that's another person or whether it's some sort of a dark force. As she's standing there, getting changed, although, blessedly, she's already changed, so we don't have that male gazy moment.
Right.
But it's that feels like a misdirect too. That feels like, like the director is telling us, hey, she's being watched. Hey, somebody's coming after her. And there's never any real payoff for that. I mean, we've had handheld camera earlier. The first handheld camera that we get is at the very beginning when we establish that there's something unsafe going on in this attic.
Right, because we have that irony moment where Buffy says, I just want to do something safe. And then we go into the attic. And of course, the handheld camera, the shakiness of the handheld camera is a visual language.
Mm-hmm.
It's a visual language that tells us that something is very wrong here, something is dangerous, something is on edge, something is unpredictable.
Yeah, it's literally
because the handheld
unsteady.
camera is not controlled, literally unsteady. Yeah, so that's really interesting. I hadn't noticed the handheld in the scene with Amy and Cordelia, but that makes absolute sense, because she's unsteady. But the thing is that because we're with Amy, we're in Amy's POV for that scene, we are told that she is unsteady, when the fact of the matter is Catherine is unstable, like mentally, but she is absolutely steady. She knows what she's doing, and she is the most powerful and most dangerous thing in that space.
Absolutely. And she's very deliberate about what she does. So that scene does not match up for me with the episode as a whole, with the twist that we're setting up for Catherine and Amy. But I think this issue of the mother taking over her daughter's body is really, really interesting. Because at first it looks like a literalized version of a parent living vicariously through their child.
Oh, sure.
Except this is a parent living literally through her child.
Well, and that's the thing. You take the meaning, you take the reality, and you branch it off into a metaphor. And I think they actually did that really well.
Absolutely. But I think that there's something else there too. And it's connected to touch. Yeah. And I don't know. This feels like a little bit of a stretch, but as soon as I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. There's a deep metaphorical violation of being inside someone else's body without that person's consent, right?
Yes.
So, so we've got that metaphor, that violation, but then Catherine's magic itself is also very connected to touch. The introduction of the magic is the hand snatching the Barbie doll. So that's, hands are the first thing that we get with this, this fictionalized version of witchcraft. Hands are the first thing we see with a spell. And then the spell that's cast on Amber sets her hands on fire. We get this lovely shot of her, it's very clear that that's what's going on. This lovely shot of her with her hands all ablaze. The spell that's cast on Cordelia blinds her, but it's depicted for television with this lovely covering of her eyes, which is just it's a physical effect. It's so easy. Contact lenses, so effective. They always work for me. I love it. I love a magical or demonic contact lens.
Right. And it's creepy to see the eyes all
Absolutely.
white. That's just a really creepy effect and very simple. Yeah.
So that affects, it affects her eyes. And we've got the spell cast on the girl in the science lab. Do we ever learn her name?
I don't know. I don't know if we do.
I try to name characters when I know their names, but she doesn't have a name. That spell seals her mouth. So she's, again, the physical body is being affected by the spell. And then, of course, Buffy is played like drunkenness, with her falling all over Xander, who seems totally prepared to take advantage of this incapacitated young woman. And oh my God.
But no, it's not good. We're gonna be talking a lot about Xander in a little bit.
So we've got hands, eyes, mouth. These are all areas of the body where survivors of sexual abuse might be vulnerable, both literally because of what has been done to them or what they have experienced, or what they've been forced to do, and metaphorically, unable to see the world clearly, unable to speak, truth about what's going on with them. And the magic is nearly always associated with dramatic moments connected to the other person's body. So when Buffy tackles Amber to the ground to put out the fire, she has to throw her body on top of Amber's. Buffy tackles Cordelia again, throwing herself on top of Cordelia to get her out of the way of the speeding truck. Magic drunk Buffy has to be restrained physically by Xander and Willow, which would not work, but whatever.
Because she's drunk, but she's still the Slayer.
Buffy.
But yeah.
I mean, come on, but whatever. So they have to grab her and physically drag her, you know, despite the she's resisting being dragged, but they drag her out.
Right. Right.
And then when Catherine gets magicked back into her body, she leaps onto Buffy. So we've got this really physical, violent physical connection to the magic that's going on that I find very interesting and really suggests to me some sort of a mother-daughter sexual abuse angle.
Wow. I had never seen that before.
And I think, I mean, like I say, it feels like a bit of a stretch, but on the other hand, once you look for it, once you start to see the connection to the physicality of the story, I think that there's something there beyond just the mother living through her daughter.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, entering the body without consent, you know, I mean, that is a sexual
absolutely.
metaphor.
And having lived in that body for months, I mean, you know, having to, just the implication of having to dress and bathe and feed or not this physical body that she's occupying. I think that there's something very, you know, obviously very,
well, that's a
very
really,
intimate.
That's a dark alley,
intimate.
Man. I hadn't even thought about that. But yeah, it is kind of creepy. And I mean, you know, we don't see anything like that, but I mean, there are other things that you can do with somebody's body if you have control over it.
Absolutely. Because we're not doing sex or sexuality really at this stage in Buffy. We had a little bit of rape imagery last time with Luke and Buffy in the mausoleum.
Yes.
But they're not, we're really not doing sex, as pointed up by the moment when Buffy is helping her mother unpack the tribal art.
Right.
And she peeks at the fertility statue. What do you think of that moment?
Right. And she's jeepers. Right. Yeah, I thought it was funny. And of course, you know, like the only textual place where we go anywhere near sex so far, you know, and it's, you know, and of course it is the mother protecting the daughter from this knowledge of this fertility, you know, statue or whatever, and what that represents. So that was that's, you know, I thought that was kind of a funny moment, but yeah, I think that's the only place where we textually even remotely nod toward sex, aside from Xander's grossness, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
But the other thing about that moment is if you want to read in a narrative of mother-daughter abuse, Joyce is protecting Buffy from images of bodies and sexuality. So could we extend that? You know, could we see Catherine as, I mean, because cheerleading is sex light, right? I mean, cheerleaders are there to be titillating, aren't they?
Well, yes. Short skirts that fly up and show the underwear, which of course is like, you know, shorts that they wear underneath, but still there is a very sexualized, a little girl, innocent sexualized element to cheerleading that has always been there. You know, I mean, it has always been the subtext in every high school, both in reality and, you know, always again on TV. And we have this, you know, this kind of culturally sort of sanctioned fantasy of, you know, men loving girls in cheerleading outfits and having fantasies about, you know, high school girls in either cheerleading outfits or Catholic schoolgirl outfits, both of which, you know, lead to a disturbing place. So yeah, no, that's interesting.
Yeah, but Amy's body in particular really is the focus of a lot of the energy around the magic that's going on. And I don't know what to make of that beyond ew. I mean,
yeah, no, it is.
Like,
well, I hadn't seen that before.
sorry. Now you're going to
That's
see it
okay. I'll never
forever.
unsee it now. Exactly.
You're gonna see it
Exactly. Oh
forever.
God.
And then I
Yeah.
just the another moment that just does not sit right with me is at the very end when Buffy and Amy, who's now back in her own body, are walking away from the trophy case. Amy says, I'm just happy to have my body back. I'm thinking of getting fat. And
Right.
I know that weight and body size and Amy's body size and her mother's body size in particular are very much the focus of that abusive relationship dynamic. But I can't help but think about the frequent occurrence among survivors of assault and abuse, that weight gain tends to be part of the trauma.
Yeah.
And I just, I feel very strongly that that's not something that our writer and director set out to put in this story, but it's there nonetheless. And I find that last exchange strange. But in light of reading the text as a story about mother-daughter sexual abuse, it really seems telling that Amy's separation from her mother, not only is she separating from her mother by, truly, I mean, she's once again separate from her mother. Her mother's no longer in her life because her mother is trapped in a cheerleading trophy forever.
Cheerleading trophy, which is fantastic.
But she's going to separate her body from her mother's body as well.
Yeah. Well, from her mother's control. I mean, I think that a lot of it is that's something that when your body has been violated, you gain control over it. And one of the ways in which I think people express that control, and especially for Amy, whose mother had, starved her body for all those months, is, I'm gonna get fat. I'm gonna, eat whatever I want. And that's the thing too, is that instead of saying I'm gonna eat whatever I want, because we have this thing with the brownies too, right? Her mother controlled what she ate. She would feed her broth, and then she would go have brownies over at Willow's house, and then she's, her dad is baking her brownies at the end. So the brownies and the ability to eat becomes this huge, massive rebellion for women. And I think in general for women that is true. In general, culturally, we're told we need to be as small as we can possibly be. We are encouraged to always lose weight, and there are a lot of different factors that go into that, some of which is, of course, the dietary industrial complex, which makes a huge amount of money by creating a problem which doesn't exist and then saying we can solve it for you, but I think that there's this thing about being allowed to eat whatever you want, that eating actually becomes an act of rebellion for women in general. And so when you pick that up from the culture, whether you mean to place it in here in the middle of all of this grander context or not, it's something that you pick up from the culture, because that is how women rebel. Women rebel by feeding themselves. Like they're not allowed to feed themselves, So yeah, that's and interesting.
Buffy backs her up. Buffy says, I hear that look is in for spring.
Yeah.
Which, on the one hand is lovely and affirming, not why would you want to do that? But also supports the idea that this is a fashion choice about the larger culture, about what is trendy as opposed to what is best for Amy and her bodily autonomy. So speaking of bodily autonomy and women's autonomy in general.
In general, yes.
Oh God, Lani, I can't with Xander. I can't.
Wow. No, Xander is particularly horrible. I had this kind of idea the last time, we talked about this shadow side of Xander, this shadow side that I think even the writers are not completely aware of. And then there's light Xander, who is the Xander that I love and the Xander that I have, had affection for all the time. And so throughout my first, few runs through Buffy, the only Xander I actually saw was light Xander, was fun, lovely Xander that I really really adore. And so now I'm going through these and I'm like making a list of all of the things, like what is Shadow Xander? And Shadow Xander is the unconscious things that Xander is allowed to do without consequence, and then there's Light Xander, which is funny, sweet, Xander. And I had a ton of stuff for Shadow Xander and almost nothing for Light Xander, which to me is so incredibly telling, how this character ends up behaving in these really terrible ways that we kind of just dismiss with this boys will be boys. Isn't it cute and funny?
Yeah.
I mean, there's an argument that Xander's behavior can be waved away with that. Like, he's a teenage boy. This is how teenage boys are. But it really is this very damaging boys will be boys blanket permission for them to behave however they want. And then, the reason why boys are that way is because we train boys to be that way. Mm-hmm. We train them to believe that they are entitled to everything, And I mean, it starts with the fucking bracelet. Right? They are not dating. There's been nothing from Buffy, to indicate that she is into him or that she wants a relationship with him. But he gives her this bracelet. And the bracelet, I had a bracelet like that. He was my boyfriend. I was in like the 7th grade or whatever. And he got me a bracelet and I loved it, because that was, but I remember those bracelets, Mm-hmm. But it's this early marking of a woman as possessed, as yours, right? She wears a physical chain around her wrist that says he's hers, because it says yours always, right?
Yeah.
That she would wear, right? But it is a symbol of bondage, and he is not wearing anything. Like, the boys don't wear anything, They give nothing. They wear nothing until marriage, and then they wear a little ring, which they take off whenever they go to the bar or whatever, But girls get pinned. They wear the high school ring. They wear the Letterman's jacket. They get these bracelets. And boys, there are no strings on the boys. There's no symbolism of possession that is placed on men, but it's placed on women. And here he is trying to give her, this thing, this symbol of his possession of her. And she's looking at it and she's like, well, that's weird. But she's not even thinking about him in that way. She's not thinking about it in that way. But it is such a weird thing for him to put this bracelet on her. And then I was thinking about, we have the necklace that Angel gave her, right? So why is the necklace better? Why is the necklace different? And the reason for that is that it is not a symbol of possession. It's a symbol of protection. He gives her something that she needs in the fight. It is a silver cross. She can actually hurt a vampire with that.
And she does.
Yeah,
when
she
Luke
does.
is going to bite her.
Right. It's the necklace.
It's the necklace that gets him off of her.
Right. So it is a protective thing, and that is different.
Yeah. Which, because we're going real deep into the sexual assault metaphors, but
no, we really are.
Yeah. I mean, this is still pretty, folks. This is what we're going to It's gonna get interesting and problematic.
Yes, it is.
But I was reflecting on that moment and that gesture of the necklace as I was thinking about Xander's bracelet, and it occurred to me that it's this gesture of protection from Angel that helps Buffy, enables Buffy to fight off this vampire rape.
Yes.
That it is on men to stop rape. She's not strong enough to get Luke off of her. She needs that support from Angel in order to survive that encounter. And I'll co-sign that accidental message in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Men, it is on you to stop rape.
It is on you to stop rape, absolutely. Although it is on the person who's doing the attacking, not necessarily somebody who's protecting. Because, traditionally throughout our culture, right, we men, quote unquote, have been stopping rape by basically caging women.
Yes.
Women are not allowed, like, at school, right? If their bra strap shows, they get sent home, right? Because a boy can't see a bra strap. It's, again, boys will be boys, right? We're not stopping the male behavior. we're like covering up the female. So, I mean, that's something that we've been doing culturally for a long time. And while I'm actually okay with the necklace, and I think that it was a good symbol of protection, and that I really see that as Angel working in a team with Buffy. Yeah. And no way was Luke going to get the best of Buffy with or without the necklace. The necklace just bought her an opening to fight back,
Absolutely.
I mean, so there, I think, like, I'm okay. But I see exactly, what you're talking about. And that is something that, that we have throughout our culture, this idea that we, it started with covering women up with clothing, and in some cultures that is still, part of it, where women need to be covered up because men can't see any part of a woman without being overcome with lust and wanting to rape her,
Right.
So rather than impinging on male behavior and putting that weight on men who make those choices, the weight is on the women to protect themselves, but you need to do that both ways,
Absolutely. Yeah. Male entitlement to women's bodies and experiences is something that I have a feeling we're going to come back to over and over and over again on this show, especially with Xander, because my God, so back to this bracelet that we hate so much.
Yes.
When he gives it to her, he doesn't even do it as he half-asses it. He gives it to her and then he's like, oh, they all said that. They all came like, so which one is it, Xander? Is this
well, it's like he's secretly trying to brand her without her knowing.
Yes. He's so entitled. He's so
Which is
entitled
even
to her.
Worse. And that does speak to consent. Like he's telling her that this is something other than what it really is. And so because she doesn't know what it is, she cannot consent to it. She wouldn't accept it if she realized that was how he felt about her. But he's not even brave enough to like say, what he's feeling with her. Well, and give her a chance to reject him. He doesn't want to give her the chance, the opportunity to reject him.
Exactly. Willow calls him on it too. He says, it's like we're dating. And Willow says something about, except for the hugging and the kissing and her knowing about it.
And her knowing about it, exactly.
I mean, if that's not...
Yeah.
It's so gross.
It's an incredible amount of entitlement from Xander. And, and I'm telling you, not the last time we're going to see that from him. But calling it out is what makes it better. The fact that I can see Shadow Xander now, whereas I couldn't even see it before because this was all expected. All of this stuff was expected from boys, the gross way that he leers over Amber when she's stretching, waiting for the tryouts to begin. Yeah. Is just completely disgusting. And let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Why is she stretching out onto chairs? Now you're a dancer.
I am.
So like, is that a thing that dancers do?
It is a thing.
That seems dangerous.
It's a thing that you do if you have, if you can stretch further than a full split. So if you want your hips lower than your ankles, for the stretch, you might prop yourself up on two chairs. There is no reason for her to be doing that, though, apart from, elevating her for the male gaze. That's the only reason.
Exactly. For the male gaze. So I don't know. I thought that was incredibly gross. I hated the way when the tryouts were posted, Xander pushes his way past all of these girls who actually have a dog in that fight, who are looking to see if their names are on there. But he pushes up to the front of the line and gets in there. And, and gets in their way so that he can see and report back to Buffy, whether she made it or not. So I find that really annoying. And then there's this moment, too, with Xander, which actually I kind of liked because it's not Shadow Xander, because it gets called out when he has this complete misunderstanding of Willow's feelings for him, and he's like, you're one of the guys, that's my Willow, know, and then later on when Buffy calls him one of the girls, it's him being textually slapped for that behavior.
Yes.
Which I'm okay, as long, like, I don't mind the bad behavior. You can have bad behavior in stories, you should, because it's a great source of conflict and of societal, commentary.
Definitely.
But you have to acknowledge it and you have to have consequences for it. And there's never any consequences, for Xander. And we also get this like disgusting friend zone thing, right? Cordelia walks past. He says, Cordelia, you haven't been mean to me all day. Cordelia, you haven't paid any attention to me all day. You're supposed to. You owe me that attention,
Yeah.
And then he comes in and he says, see how she doesn't even see me as a man, much less a human being, which states that men are higher level than even human beings, which is a level lower.
Yes.
Which puts him in that male supremacy thing, which, by the way, at that. And then he has it's the invisible man syndrome, a blessing in Cordelia's case, a curse in Buffy's. I mean, he is a proto-incel right there. This idea that he's being friend zoned, and that's a bad thing because no one wants to be friends with women. We want to possess and conquer women. And when we can't have that, somehow we're being denied our right,
Yeah. Oh, it's just...
Yeah.
Like,
no, it's all bad.
It's so bad. It's so bad. Every moment of Xander is bad in this episode.
I know. Well, no, there's one moment, and this is always the moment that I remember. And it's cute Xander. It's cute self-deprecatory Xander, where he says, "I laugh in the face of danger, then I hide until it goes away." That's cute. It's self-aware. This is the kind of Xander that I really like, and I mean, there's a reason why we love Xander. And a lot of people who do love Xander, I mean, a lot of people have real serious problems with Xander, which they should. But there are reasons for those of us who love Xander why we love Xander. And splitting him into these two parts, Shadow Xander and Light Xander, is kind of an interesting exercise, especially when you think of it in terms of season 5's episode, The Replacement, where we literally split him into two. But they're not, even then though, it's not like Light Xander and Shadow Xander. It's kind of like strong Xander and weak Xander. But the jerky Xander is still evenly split among both parts. We never completely cut that out. But I find it so interesting, especially when I think in context of how much I have always loved Xander. Yeah. How much like Xander, the funny beta male is my catnip. Like, I love that guy. I always love that guy, and yet the things that he does that just he sort of gets away with, that are expected, that are basically rubber stamped as okay because we don't textually counteract them, is a real problem.
Yeah. The show has a masculinity problem. A little bit of a masculinity problem. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on Giles in this episode and father figures in particular.
Okay.
We have we hear about Amy's father as well.
Right.
But Giles, I mean, we open with Giles in this. I mean, he's giving Buffy a dad speech, right?
Oh yeah, no, he is. He's right into the father figure, like immediately. That is his role with her.
So and I don't know, there's something very dear to me about him using his jacket as a pillow for Buffy when she's incapacitated.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is, but it just like he sets her down and then tucks her in, and I just go, oh.
Yeah. It's very sweet. It's very sweet the way that he is protective of her. And the thing is that there is this element to protection, right? They can be patriarchal, like we were talking about with Angel, before with the necklace, right? This sense of, we must protect the women kind of thing. But it's not even that he protects her, because he also is standing behind her while she goes out and does the fight. So he is never saying you shouldn't, you're not strong enough, you can't handle this yourself. What he's doing is he's being a support person to her. And it's just different. There's a difference between protecting and protecting women through caging them, through putting them in a box, wrapping them in bubble wrap, whatever you do, which says you're not strong enough, right? Giles, in his relationship with Buffy, is never a case of you're not strong enough. It's a case of, here, let my strength add to your strength, which is the way these relationships should be, not just father-daughter, but all human relationships should be. Let my strength add to your strength. Let me do what I can here for you. And so in that moment, when he takes his jacket off, and also, like, I would like to say, here we have men putting things on Buffy. We've got Angel with the necklace, which again, I like, but still men putting things on Buffy. Xander with the bracelet, right? Which of course brings to mind the Letterman's jacket and all of those things that I said before, right? Giles is taking his clothing and not marking her with it, not possessing her with it, but supporting her with it.
Yeah.
And I love that.
That moment really works for me. Giles in this episode, I really enjoy when he and Buffy go to Amy's house to confront her mother, and Giles is speaking to Catherine like a fellow adult. He believes that this is the mother who is, has no idea what's going on. And it's Amy, in her mother's body, makes eye contact with Buffy, and then Buffy realizes what's going on. While Amy is telling her story, Giles is sitting off to the side. She's speaking to both of them, but she's speaking mostly to Buffy, and Giles is he's just kind of there as a support person and as an information person.
Right. He's not taking over.
No.
He's not with anything, he's just
there letting her speak. And then he's obviously he's the one with the magical knowledge. He knows to go get the book. And that cat in the box.
Right.
Lani, is that a pussy joke?
I read it as a Schrodinger's cat joke. I have it in my notes. Well, it looks like Schrodinger's cat is alive, so at least there's that. No, I don't think it's a pussy joke, but the cat in the box, that's kind of,
I don't know.
I hadn't really thought about that.
Oh.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I hadn't thought about it that way. But I don't think so. I mean, I think honestly, first of all, the cat in the box is ridiculous. Why would you keep a cat? I mean, a black cat in a box, and obviously this is a witch, and she's not good to her daughter, so she's not going to be good to, a cat. But at the same time, it's such a ridiculous thing. And I think they just do it for the jump, for the, oh my God, there's a thing in the box, and the cat is like, I'm out of here. All right. I've been watching this woman do some weird, fucked up shit for a while. I would like to be feral on my own. I'll eat mice. I don't care. I just can't deal with this.
I cannot deal with these Barbie dolls in this cauldron. I am out of here. Yeah.
Well, no, I actually, and it's funny because there is kind of a relationship between science and magic in this episode, which I find kind of interesting, especially with relationship to Willow, right? So like then the science, of course, relationship, the jump that I'm making is Schrodinger's cat, right? Of course, which is the theory that the cat inside the box is both dead and not dead until you open the box and observe, you cannot know. So that's a scientific idea. So it made me kind of think, and here is this what I would call like a scientific, for me, it's more of a scientific rather than a pussy representation. In that magical space.
Better,
I like it better too. I think that
I'm sorry, I had to go there.
No, I think it's great. I'm glad that you brought it up. But now, of course, I will never be able to think of it any other way. I used to be innocent, and then I did a podcast with Noelle LaCroix. But I mean, we have science in all of these magical spaces, and we have magic within the scientific spaces. So, we do this this test on Amy, in the chemistry lab to find out if she's a witch, and of course she is because it turned blue. Right. Not unlike the pregnancy test. But they do this test with magical elements within this science environment, and then we've got Giles later, the same thing. He's doing a magical spell in the chemistry lab when he's switching the bodies back and reversing all of the spells that Catherine had put on everybody. And then, we see Willow, and of course we know that Willow in time is going to become, incredibly powerful witch. She's going to have incredible powerful magic that she wields. And here, we go from this scientific place, sort of taking science and moving it, forcefully into this magical space, which I think is really interesting because of, Arthur C. Clarke, right? Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. That the relationship between science and magic does end up getting blurred in some spaces. And of course, that's the difference between science fiction and fantasy, right? When you feel that kind of weird overlap between these two spaces, that's sort of the uncanny valley of science fiction and fantasy, where it's not one, it's not the other, it's kind of both, but they're so opposite each other, because the whole point of fantasy is about these magical metaphors that represent emotional spaces, and emotional realities. Whereas science is about science. Science is about actual reality. And so when you have science and magic kind of crashing into each other at a certain space, it's like, in Star Wars, we have the Force, and then suddenly George Lucas comes in and calls it midichlorians, and you're suddenly like, what the fuck, right? It's a bad space, because we're smashing our metaphor of emotional reality into the science of actual reality. And it always feels in these story spaces really weird for me. And there was something about that. Although I like that Willow is doing her first magic spell. This is her first magic spell ever. And it's kind of interesting to see her do that, and in a space in which she's so comfortable, because it's chemistry and it's science, which is her kind of space right now, but that the magic is moving in and sort of claiming her from that space, and it will pull her out of it. And she's going to move, all the way over into the magical end of the spectrum, which I think is really good. But I don't know if I'm the only one who feels that clash between the magical metaphor and the space where science becomes advanced, and so advanced that it looks like magic, but yet it's still science.
I don't think you're the only one who sees that. I love Willow as the magical scientist. I love that we see her capability. And in fact, she takes the dissection over from Xander. Xander can't do it. He's too squeamish, and she just...
Right, because Xander can't do it, right? But also, can I just say, that's a frog or a toad, right? That a newt is a different thing.
Yes.
Like, apparently the eye of a frog and the eye of a newt are interchangeable magically. Well, so I guess.
Even eye of newt isn't eye of newt. Eye of newt, I think, is mustard seed.
Oh, is it really?
I mean, I know we're not doing real witchcraft on this show, but we're not.
Right.
That's another thing. Let's talk a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about witchcraft and magic on this show. This is our first introduction to the idea of witchcraft on Buffy, and it's interesting to me because last time we had some borrowing of religious and spiritual symbols without really giving them any context. I'm thinking about Buffy's box of Slayer fun things, and her communion wafers.
Yes,
because
sure.
Yeah. So we've got this opening handheld shot in the attic, and we see drying flowers and herbs and all of your sort of general markers of fictionalized witchcraft. And it's we've got green sludge and a cauldron and gargoyles and dolls hanging from the ceiling, because I don't know, is things hanging from the ceiling, is that just visual shorthand for witchcraft?
I think maybe.
Yeah.
Because you have the hanging herbs that are drying.
Right.
Which, of course, witchcraft, I mean, that's science, that's medicine.
Absolutely.
In the past, that's what that was. But they called it witchcraft because it was sufficiently advanced technology that they couldn't understand at the time. Like, how does a flower work, to fix this thing? It must be witchcraft.
Well, and the thing about witchcraft is that it's a very broad term. And it's different across cultures and societies, and even for individuals. So, I mean, very, very simply, witchcraft just means the belief in and practice of magical abilities, right? So witchcraft, I mean, here we have witchcraft and witches being associated with women, which I think is part of the reason that we have Willow take over from Xander.
Right.
But I just feel the need to say, because this is an inclusive podcast, that witchcraft is available to and practiced by people of all genders. This association with witchcraft and the feminine is largely due to media representation, historical control of women's bodies and experiences. Here we go again. And I think it's also worth noting that here, in this episode of Buffy, at least we're talking about witchcraft, the practice, and not Wicca, the religion. But
Yes.
we're gonna have some interesting neo-pagan religious conversations, I think, as we go along. But yeah,
Oh yeah, we will, because there's a reference where the show itself in season 4 aligns witchcraft with Wicca,
yeah,
you know, to a certain degree, and we don't really get a whole lot of clarity with that. It's really just an opportunity to kind of make fun
yeah.
of Wiccans,
I think so.
basically.
I think so. But this
Yeah.
this depiction of magic. I mean, do you have any thoughts about introducing magic to the show this way?
I mean, I think that it isn't how magic is going. I mean, magic, like everything, like the vampires, like the demons, like the nature of the soul, you know, all of these things is going to go through a fair amount of evolution throughout Buffy. And when we start with any of these things, we kind of take the most simplistic representation of that thing and bring it in, you know. So I think that that's how we're starting with witchcraft in this episode, and also associating with women, and also associating with negativity and badness. Like Willow does that one spell, you know, and then Giles as a man comes in and does the spell that reverses everything.
Yeah.
Right. So he's able to come in there and reverse it. And we have this moment with Giles, too, where he says, "Oh, that was my first spell," which we know textually is absolutely not true. We're going to retcon that later. But he has that moment where it's like, my first spell. And I was like, no, I saw you dunking your hands in there and shouting into the void. Like, this was
He
no
knew
way your
exactly
first.
what he was doing.
This is not your first rodeo, Giles.
Oh,
Please.
Giles knew exactly what he was doing when he plunged his hands into that fish tank of magic. Yeah. Oh,
Yes, the fish tank of magic.
I mean, really now,
But
Giles.
yeah. But I don't know. So I think it's a somewhat flattened representation of witchcraft and of the kind of magic that we're going to see evolve as we move through it. But for a starting place, I think it's okay. What did you think about the representation of witchcraft? Bringing that magic into Buffy.
Like bringing magic in as something that exists in the world of Buffy, because God, does that open up, you know, worlds of possibility just in terms of storytelling. But it is connected with darkness, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure they knew going in what they were going to end up doing with magic.
Oh, I don't think so. Yeah.
But I'm very partial to magic in storytelling. I just love it. It's such a great vehicle for telling different kinds of stories. And I love the intersection of magic and science in the context of the high school. I feel like, because we're talking about knowledge, that it all sort of goes together, that magic is our connection to the adult sort of world a little bit with, I don't know. It feels, there's something grown up about magic in this episode. And maybe it's just that, you know, touching again on that darkness of assault and, you know, non-consensual touch. But I feel like knowledge being connected to magic, you know, we've got, you know, Giles knows, you know, this is his first spell. But he knows how this whole, how the casting would work, and he knows what to look for. So I dig it. I like magic in the world of Buffy.
Yeah. Well, it's also a discussion of power, which is essentially one of the things that Buffy is about. When we go into season 7, we're going to have them stated outright. It's about power, right? And this is always about a certain level of power within Buffy. Like, where do you get your power? And here in this episode, we have witchcraft and this particular brand of magic associated very strongly with this kind of dark force, and we only engage with magic when we're fighting the darkness, right? When Willow is doing the spell so that they can discover if Amy's the witch, right? And then Giles doing the spell to reverse it. But what this does, what this space, like having magic within the world of Buffy, within this cosmology, allows for power to not just be solely held by Buffy, that her support team can dip into this power. And of course, it ends up being Willow, who becomes a very, very powerful, witch throughout the course of the story.
Yeah.
And Xander doesn't.
Yeah.
Xander gets no powers, nothing special. He never dips into that powerful space. It's Buffy and it's Willow who end up being incredibly powerful. And then Giles is very powerful as a support person. He doesn't do these things, on his own. He doesn't, become like a powerful witch. We never talk about him like that, but he is able to do spells when it's necessary. He knows what the spells are and what we need for them. He has all of that knowledge, but even Giles, for the most part, is a mundane form of support. It is the two women, Buffy and Willow, who end up dipping into supernatural power.
Right. Well, and there's one woman that we haven't really talked about so far in this episode, and that's Joyce. And Joyce is the very definition of mundane.
Yeah.
I mean, she is.
Yes. Mm-hmm. She rules the mundane part of the story.
Joyce. She is the opposite of magical. But I have to tell you, the first time I watched Buffy, I was not a parent.
Right.
I am a parent now, and I feel for Joyce.
I know. The older I get, the more I feel for Joyce. I really do. Although I don't care for Joyce a lot in like the first, 3 seasons. And I think part of that is because we're you can argue that we're deep in Buffy's POV and that what we see isn't actually really Joyce. It's just that whatever Buffy needs and whatever Buffy wants to do, we have to have somebody pushing back against her. So like in the beginning of this episode, we have Joyce as the distracted mom, the mom who's too busy, the mom who doesn't have time, to spend any time with Buffy. And Buffy's all like, kind of sad about that in that one particular scene, right? We have that moment where Joyce is, sounds like Amy's mom doesn't have a lot to do, that kind of thing, the busy mom thing, right? Then we come back later and Joyce is trying to connect with Buffy and trying to talk with Buffy and and Buffy completely rejects that. Like, she doesn't want that either. So no matter what, Joyce is simply in a scene to be the opposite of whatever Buffy needs or wants at any given time. And because of that, she's not characterized consistently. We really don't get a strong sense of who she is. Because of that, she says terrible things. I mean, not in this episode, but throughout the run of Buffy, she says some really, truly awful things to Buffy. And she can be just terrible in so many ways, but it just always feels like her role is simply to be the annoying mom, to simply be the mom who's pushing back against Buffy, the mom who doesn't understand, who doesn't get it, right? Would you want to be a 16-year-old girl again if you could? And of course she wouldn't, she can't understand Buffy. Yeah. We have this whole scene where Joyce, her whole thing is, I don't get it. I don't don't understand you. I don't understand who you are. I can't possibly, and yet we have Buffy, wanting that relationship in one scene and then completely rejecting it when Joyce hands it to her in another scene. So it's Joyce is just simply kind of a cipher for the mom who's getting in the way, the antagonist mom, And so I find that because she doesn't get characterized. We don't really give her a personality of her own. She runs an art gallery, that's Joyce. That's her identity. She's that, and she is Buffy's mom. But there's nothing about her that is, that gives her a personality, that gives her kind of her own consistent sense of self, of who she is. And so because of that, Joyce tends to bother me because she's just always wrong. She's always saying the wrong thing. She's always doing the wrong thing. And I think that Christine Sutherland the actress who plays Joyce, brings such a lovely maternal, kind of nurturing connection in the character. But what we get out of Joyce that is likable comes from, I think, Christine Sutherland's performance and not
Absolutely.
really from the textual work that she's given.
Absolutely. They give her nothing to do and she does everything with it.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. Joyce is just there to be the mom who, I mean, as she says herself, doesn't get it.
Doesn't get it.
And it's unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, and we use her to be a contrast to Amy's mom, right? Amy's mom, who is the engulfing, like basically, there's two brands of narcissistic mothers, right? There's the engulfing, and this is something, of course, not everybody knows. I know this because whatever, because of reasons. But there's the engulfing, narcissistic mother who is like, Amy's mom, who takes over, wants to live their life through you, who controls and is involved in every little bit of their children's lives and can't leave them alone. And then there's these
3 hours in the morning and 3 hours at night.
Right. I'm practicing with my mother, all day. And then there's the ignoring narcissistic mom who is so into her own thing that she doesn't even care where her kids are or what they're doing. Or, the only time she cares about her kids is when they reflect well on her or when they reflect poorly and then she's angry with them, And so I look at these two mothers that are contrasting in these two very specific ways, but both of them are identified as failures. Now, of course, I'm looking at a narcissistic mom model, which is not what either of these mothers are. Though Amy's mom, I think Catherine may be.
Catherine is diagnosable.
She is definitely diagnosable by somebody who has like degrees that I don't have. So I'm not in a space to be able to do that. But I mean, I think that we have both of these moms. We have Joyce, most generously being presented as the very busy, mom who's got other things to do, and isn't, like overwhelming her daughter, but also in that way allows Buffy a space for Buffy to be her own independent person, which I think is actually a very positive thing. We have that moment with Buffy where she's saying, you don't have to lock step, to Amy. She's like, you don't have to lock step with your mother. Yeah. And then we see Buffy who doesn't lock step with her mother, who talks back to her mother, who argues with her mother, and so like what that does, I think that is a positive for Joyce, is it shows that Joyce is raising Buffy to be independent, to look after herself, to take care of herself without being neglectful. Yeah. I mean, she's really not neglectful. She's busy. Yes. And that's, I think, not a bad thing, but she's not neglectful. She does pay attention with Buffy. She's in the morning, making fresh orange juice, which, by the way, I've done once as a mother. That was very early in their lives. I will never do it again because that's just way too much work. And when Buffy comes in and drinks both like orange juices, like that's where I'm like with the mom, like something that the first time I watched Buffy, I wouldn't have made that association. But I'm like, hey, do you know how many oranges to get that 1 cup of juice that woman had to go through? She has been there since 5 o'clock this morning, making that 1 cup of juice. And then Buffy comes in, drinks both of them. And Joyce is like, wait a minute. I wanted some. That's another 3 hours.
And can we talk about that scene for just a minute? I have a very important story expert type question for you about that scene. Okay. Buffy, Buffy wakes up, breaks her alarm clock with her Slayer strength, and then comes downstairs singing Macho Man. Right. Lani, why is it Macho Man?
Why is it Macho Man? That's interesting. I think it's Macho Man because Macho Man is one of those songs that's really easy to make fun of. It's one of those 1970s songs, it's Village People for crying out loud. Like, it is a silly song that, and having a young girl sing I Want to Be a Macho Man, I don't think that there was a strong intent of like, thematic reverberation there. But at the same time, it is kind of an interesting, she's singing this song about powerful masculinity, right? And of course, a song bemoaning the fact that like, I want to be a macho man means that you're really not, So, I mean, even the men singing that song are coming from this ironic space. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was pretty cute.
I don't know why, but that song just pulled me right out. I know that we're playing magic like drunkenness, But for some reason,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Buffy singing Macho Man, I was just like, nope. Of all the songs.
Of all the songs that the teenage girl, I mean, and this is a teenage girl in 1997.
Right.
Like Macho Man was like mid 70s,
Yeah.
you know, when that was the thing. And I don't know that anybody has thought about that song since the mid 70s. So for Buffy to be singing that song, it's one of these things too, like the pop culture references that you see in these really heavily inundated pop culture stories. Like Gilmore Girls is a prime example of this. You know, and I think I'm probably going to end up calling it Being Gilmore. You know, I think I had another reference for it, but Rory Gilmore would always come up with all of these pop culture references. Rory and all of her teenage girlfriends, right? With these pop culture references to things that they couldn't possibly have known about. Now, I mean, granted, Lorelai is going to be talking about a lot of those pop culture references, and Rory's going to be picking them up through osmosis to a certain degree. Absolutely. Like, you know, I get it. But to have like everybody, all of the teenage kids coming up with all of these, you know, these references. And so we're seeing kind of that Gilmore effect happening with Buffy, where the pop culture references belong to the person writing it, who is some 20 years older than the kids that are reading these lines,
right.
You know, so we have whoever is writing it, writing their pop culture references from the context that they understand them, and then giving them to these kids who are, you know, 16 years old and probably would have no knowledge of the Village People, because I don't take Joyce as the kind of person who's playing the Village People, you know, while she's driving Buffy to school. Like I just don't kind of see that, you know. So I mean, I think with Rory Gilmore, it makes a little more sense than Buffy with this particular reference. But yeah, Buffy was totally Gilmore in that moment.
All right. So in the spirit of 90s feminism, I want to end each episode with a little revolutionary feminist moment of the week.
Yes.
That I want to call girl power.
All right.
All right. How do I want to express this? Because I love it so much. And it plays into my favorite part, which we'll get into next. Okay. But the thing I love in Witch is women caring for each other through trauma. We see this right at the beginning. Buffy leaps on Amber to put the fire out, and she's holding her on the ground saying, it's okay. It's okay. It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
You know, Buffy is in compassionate, comforting hero mode right from the get-go. And then it's Buffy's connection with Amy that enables her to make the connection that it's Amy in Catherine's body. She sees
that.
She identifies, you know, Buffy at this point in the story is dying from the spell that has been cast on her, but she's still empathic enough that she picks up on the discomfort in this woman who she thinks at this point is Amy's mother. She picks up on that discomfort when Giles is speaking so harshly to her, and then catches Amy's eye, notices the plate of brownies, which again, you know, this symbol of feminine pleasure and rebellion.
Yes.
Through eating. And then Buffy says, Amy, and is able to put it all together. And I just love the way that Buffy has had this spell cast on her, and rather than being angry, she says, you know, she's not quite correct at this point, but she says, Amy only became a witch to survive her mother. So she's been hurt, presumably by Amy. She thinks it may be by Amy at this point. Right. But she doesn't blame her because she understands that Amy is acting out as a victim, not as, you know, someone out to get her specifically. Right. And I adore that so much. I love the way Buffy listens to Amy in Catherine's body tell her story about what she'd been through with her family. It's just remarkable. And if you are a fan of women supporting each other through storytelling, I recommend Big Strong S right here on Chipperish.
Yes, it is a podcast that is completely finished now, but it is still available. And it was me and Dr. Kelly Jones going through Rising Strong by Brene Brown, Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, and Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes. It was a fantastic experience. And so, yeah, if you are feeling in need of women supporting each other through trauma, then that's the podcast for you.
Fantastic. Highly recommended.
Aw, thank you, baby. All right. So what's your favorite part?
My favorite part is related to the girl power sentiment of this show. It's in that moment when Amy is telling her story to Buffy and Giles is off to the side because this is not his space. Amy and Buffy are sitting on the couch together, and this composition is just fantastic. There's this cage looking thing behind Amy as she's talking about how things were in her house and after her father left and how her mother wouldn't even let her call, which, oh my God, some serious abuse going on there. But Buffy is, she's incapacitated. She's dying. She's got, not even 3 hours to live. And she's holding Amy's hand.
Aww.
And it's just it's so sweet, but not in an overly sentimental kind of way. It feels like a genuine moment of comfort and connection to me. And I just love it.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, it makes my favorite part feel really flat. I like the Schrodinger's cat. It wasn't until I thought about it as Schrodinger's cat that I actually loved that moment, but it's fun. And it's always fun to see Giles scream, and get taken off guard.
Yeah.
But yeah, because this isn't my favorite episode of Buffy by a long shot, which has never been. Although I like it more now that I've talked to you about it. I think that there's a lot more depth and interesting things there. So this is definitely raising it in my estimation. But for me, like as a writer, the constant misdirects, that stuff really annoys me. I didn't care for the way that they did that. So because that bugs me every time I watch this show as, a writer, it always kind of bugs me. But I like the cat in the box. Schrodinger's cat. Schrodinger's cat is alive. It's alive. All right. That is it for today. To join in the discussion on Twitter, follow me at Lani Diane Rich and Noelle at Noelle Aloud, and use the hashtag #StillPretty. But the best place for all the great discussion is two places, really. One are the Chipperish forums, which you can find if you go to chipperish.com, click on forum, you'll find them there. And the other is the Patreon Discord chat. And just $1 a month of support gets you in with some of the most amazing, smart people talking about Buffy over there. So it's really a lot of fun. Go to patreon.com/chipperish to find out how you can do that.
This episode of Still Pretty was brought to you by Chipperish media producer Ariella Jaglam. Ariella supports Chipperish Media at the power producer level, and as a reward, gets to produce whatever show she wants.
Yes.
Thank you, Ariella, and thank you to everyone who supports Chipperish Media and makes all this possible. Visit patreon.com/chipperish to find out how you too can become a Still Pretty producer.
That's right. All right. We will be back next time with Teacher's Pet, the 4th episode of season 1. Until then, don't keep your cats in a wooden box in the attic.
God, no.
And stay pretty.